Team, what's going on? Today, I have a conversation on all things structural engineering with Andy Richardson, the founding principal of 29E6, a structural engineering firm based in South Carolina. Andy is not only an incredibly knowledgeable structural engineer, but he's also one of the few in our field who actively shares his insights and his experiences with the broader ACE community through social media. So, if you don't yet follow him on LinkedIn, I highly suggest that you do. Now, let's get into today's discussion. You say, so you started 2009. Was that a product of the recession, or was that just your choice to, okay.
Yeah, I was voluntold to start my own business. But I mean, I didn't have, I guess I could have maybe tried to find work. I think I did have one offer that came out about that time, but a job offer, that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really already, I had just gotten the entrepreneur bug, read some books about entrepreneurship, really not something I had thought about in my life until about 2007. Kind of got into the Dave Ramsey kick. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey and, My Money Makeover and all that stuff. Well, so most of Dave Ramsey's advice is focused on the expense side,
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is every now and again, there will be this person that comes in and says they're making, $25,000 a year and they just don't know why they're in debt. And he's like, well, the reason is you don't have enough money. So sometimes you do just have to make more money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the point of all that was, it got me thinking of, he said, read this book. It was a guy named Dan Miller, 48 Days to the Work You Love. And he's since died, sadly, but the work is still really good. And that particular book is actually good for anybody for career, because he doesn't just focus on entrepreneurship. He talks about career as well. So maybe you don't want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you just want to have a job and you want to know how to polish up your resume the best way and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. He talks about that. It's broken up in like 3 parts, but one part is more career and the other part is more, maybe it's 2 parts, but anyway, one's career and one's entrepreneurial. So if you're definitely more in entrepreneurial, he has a couple other books focused more on that. But yeah, so that's a little bit about career. I don't know, like, what else do you want to talk about today? I don't know if that's what you want to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, we originally, I had the idea when I saw your LinkedIn post kind of talking about wood, and that was what I thought originally we would get into today. But as I kind of stewed on some questions, looked at your portfolio, dug in a little bit more, I think a big thing that, at least specific to our industry, is something that we're both doing right now that it lacks, is having a social presence in social media, specifically for structural engineers, is almost this aura of like a taboo. It seems like at least from some of my experiences, kind of like the work that we do and how we do it, and because there's so much gray area and so much interpretation of codes and this overall requirement and goal to protect human life, that we don't always tend to like the spotlight on us, even though everything that we do is really transparent, or we try to at least make it as transparent as possible with documentation and how we do things and why we can prove that it's safe. But why so many other industries seem to be having this presence in the social space to get that new, great talent in the workforce engaged and brought on to their side of things, we seem to shy away from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. It's something I think about a lot, actually, because like even last night I posted, and it was a wood frame job, but I talked about sometimes I use the S word, is what I said. I don't know if you saw that post, but S word in wood construction is steel, right?
Oh yes, I did see this. Yes.
So it's a funny thing, because sometimes what happens is you're working on like a house or even a wood framed building, and you're like, hey guys, I got to use the S word here because you got this big opening on the ocean, or you got this big span, so you got to use steel. But the point of it is, sometimes you'll post specifics, and by the way, the best way to get, you know this, the best way to get good views is to post. The more specific, the more terrific is what I found in my posts, right? Like, especially with, you can either talk about money or you can talk about details. If you want to get a post to go bananas, then do one of those two things. So if you talk about specific details, like this bolt or this steel, it's going to usually do well. If you talk generics, like, hey, I designed a building, or, you know, I designed wood frame projects, it'll do okay. So, so the downside of that is getting into what you're talking about, which is when you start posting specifics about a moment frame, then people ask specific questions like, well, what R value did you use for that moment frame? Or what was your drift calculations for wind for a moment frame? Well, that's an interesting question, because actually the code doesn't say you have to meet drift requirements for a wind moment frame. Like, I mean, this particular project is in a low seismic area, seismic C, I believe. And in residential, the IRC, in South Carolina anyway, if you're in seismic C, it's basically exempt from seismic. I mean, we could go through the code language and such, and the amendments, the South Carolina amendments on top of the IRC, the International Residential Code. But so all that being said, is we don't really look at the seismic load at all on this job. You know, now if we were across the river, then we would have had to look at that. But that's just how the code is sometimes. So, but we do have to deal with wind, and so the wind drift has specific requirements, as you know, or actually it doesn't have requirements. It's the commentary. The ASCE 7 has some commentary about wind drift. Now I choose and I recommend to follow those requirements or those commentary. One interesting thing about the commentary, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but I've got a colleague that is in the forensic world, and I take that commentary pretty substantially because he said what he's found is commentary in forensic, like legal work, has been proven to be held in high regard, right? So if the commentary says, so for example, if the commentary says you should account for drift in your wind calculations, you should probably account for drift in your wind calculations. So it's something interesting, but that I'm kind of getting down in the weeds with some of my response, but I think it requires it because this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, right? But it makes me feel uncomfortable on the one hand, because I know there's other engineers out there looking at my work and saying, well, you know, I think you should have used a H over 600 for wind, for serviceability deflection, or you know, serviceability drift, and but that's what we really should be talking about. And sometimes you may have to show some embarrassment, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And put yourself out there and be like, yeah. And actually, it makes me better. It makes me better. That's one thing that's really cool about it, is because now I'm like, man, are we okay on this wind drift calculation? So to me, it makes us, and really it makes us all better, right? I think the thing about it, and I've been reading some material, W. Edwards Deming, but the idea of a collaboration across an industry can be super valuable, right? And it makes everybody better, you better and me better. It's not like if we compete against each other and keep things in a silo, it makes us all weaker. It makes us, you know, as engineers. Now, are there trade secrets and things? Possibly, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm not necessarily going to give you everything away, but that's why I share what I share. I mean, is I want to make, I mean, one of the reasons I want to help people. I want to make it a better industry. I mean, I want all the work, of course, but but I want to make the industry better, you know. So,
yeah. I mean, that stems the same message that I started with. I just started with wanting to do something totally uncomfortable for myself. This was during, like, at the very beginning of COVID. You know, everyone's locked up inside and stuff, and I'm just like, want to try something new, and what's something I have no business doing. You know, I gravitate towards sports growing up and doing stuff like that as like an extracurricular or outdoor activities alongside this kind of educational intensive career that I chose of structural engineering. And that kind of creative side of things, while there is a huge part of creative flex in structural engineering, I truly believe. There's so much more to the creative field, music, the arts, every type of medium. And so one of those mediums, I was like, why don't I dabble with something that like in that field? And I thought about that a little bit. I was like, well, I grew up drawing a little bit and painting a little bit and doing art stuff in school. And I was like, I never did anything with photography or cameras or media or anything like that. I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing with that. So why don't I do that? And it turned out to be fantastic. But from that side of things, and the thing I told myself was just like, well, what's something I repeatedly know I can drum up some type of content about that would interest me, and it was structural engineering because it's what I love to do. But man, yeah, everything that I create just started with saying like, hey, disclaimer, this is just me learning something and I'm sharing it with you. And there's probably a host of mistakes along the way. This is how I know how to do it to date. Because this is way back, even before I was a PE. And just like, I look back on older videos, I'm like, oh man, I did that. I left out so many steps or made so many assumptions, and I can do that so much better now and better and better. But the best part about it is showing someone a starting path to be like, this is how you start the process. And then people ask those questions. Hey, you made a mistake here. Hey, did you mean to do that like that? Hey, in my experiences, I've done it like this. And I instantly open the, provisions and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, wow, I didn't even read it like that, or I missed that, or, oh, that's great. It's part of my process now. And so it's just that collaborative effort from far reaching on the internet sometimes can be really powerful, for sure, in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a big hack right there, is showing your journey, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that framework is a big hack. I mean, a good reminder to me too. You don't have to be the expert on everything. You could just say, this is how we did it, and there's a lot of humility in that people appreciate, and respect, I believe. So, and usually you're going to learn something in that. And most of the time, even if it's kind of funny, because even if they're concepts that I've known for 20 years, it's still a good reminder. It's like, yeah, that's true. That is the deflection equation of a beam that I pretty much know by heart, but it's still like a good reminder. So it's fun to see, whether it's a social media post or a YouTube thing, it's fun to see those things. And also I love to see creative ways of showing concepts, engineering concepts, and like remembering those, because, and as a mentor, I'm teaching my team all the time, and I use little analogies, whether they're diagrams or, or I'll grab something on my table, like 2 pins, and explain like, this is the thrust of a roof right here. And things like that. So I love seeing that played out on social media as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to find some way. Now, it's this big like circle of life, relating almost back to my professors in college, that were trying anything they could with little props to convey an idea. And I'm sitting in class like, oh, we're talking about steel, and this guy's got styrofoam over here. Why is he showing me like that's not what steel is? And then being like, oh, I get it. Like, it's to drive home a principle of forces that we could never comprehend that a building sees. Steel acts like, foam, can deform like foam in certain ways, and blah, blah, blah. But tell me a little bit about some of your content that I really love, and I've piggybacked off of it to help get others involved with it, is your pop quizzes that are intentionally vague, but also specifically the questions that we get every single day.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. It wasn't intentionally vague originally, because I just wrote up, one of my colleagues. I mean, this goes on since probably my first hire, like 2017. I think I wrote this out in 2017 because I mentioned that I started my original business. It was called Structural Innovations, in 2009. It was a sole practitionership, and then rebranded in 2017. I started hiring people, my first hire, I was asking a colleague, like, hey, what do you do when you hire? Like, what should I do? And one of the tips was have a technical quiz, And so I was like, well, can you send me yours? So his name's Cody Geisendorfer. I'll give him a hat tip. So thanks, Cody. And he sent me his, and I basically just like hacked his. I reused most of his questions. I've added him a few of my own or whatever, things that are very common. For example, I think the very first or second question is, you have a 19-foot beam. It's got 220 pounds per linear foot on it. Give me the shear, moment, deflection on the beam. And it's a steel. And I do say it's a steel beam. That one I don't think is vague personally, but it's written. Part of what I was going to say, Rich, is I wrote that out, 7 questions, and I haven't touched it since 2017. And because part of it is I have gotten interesting responses back, right? And I've realized there is some vagueness in the questions, right? Some of them, that's question number 1. Number 2, I think, is something like, you've got a beam and it's more like philosophical. You got a beam and it's deflecting too much.
Yes.
What should you do? Like, what are some fixes? And also, like in good quiz style, back in the elementary school, when they gave you these quizzes, it would be like, read through the entire quiz and make the last one is don't do any of the quiz or something like that. But at the very beginning of the quiz, it says, you can use any resources and do the best you can, intimating that don't ask me anything about this quiz, just do it, right? Because if you send me an email halfway through and you're like, hey, what's the modulus of the steel, or what's the modulus of the beam, just do the best you can, use resources and do the best you can. So that's why I kept it the way I kept it. And also it's been so interesting to see, because some of them are a little bit, they need a little bit of adjustment. There's one that's it's actually a frame. And to be fair, the diagram needs to be fixed, because the pins, I don't think I've shown that one on LinkedIn, so I'll have to do that one next. But the pins need to be clarified, that they're actually pin, like the way that it's pinned needs to be clarified. So because it says this is a frame, and so basically what you have is it's the typical truss. We call it a truss, but really it's a frame from a static standpoint. But it's the typical thing we see all the time if you're doing light frame construction, which is you have 2 rafters and you got a cross tie, right? It's a very simple, but it's actually kind of a challenge, because when you're dealing with frames, you get that moment and fixity. And so that was an interesting one, because I actually had an engineer that had a really hard time with that. And I was like, well, that's going to go on the quiz, because if you can't solve this question, then I need to know that before I hire you. I'm not saying I'm going to rule it out of hiring you, but I need to know what we're dealing with, right, on this. So, but number 2, the one with the shear moment deflection, it says, so that's one that I found crazy, because it says, what are the shear moment and deflection on this beam? And what I found is sometimes people don't give me all 3 answers. They might give me the shear and moment, but not the deflection or whatever, right? And I don't know, like, so that was what stimulated it. I was like, literally asking a question to the community is, am I being tricky here? Because I'm not trying to be tricky, right? I mean, and then the other thing is, I just figured, hey, this will be fun to see if people want to, answer the question, because it's just like a simply supported beam.
Yeah.
And, we love calc. Engineers love calcs. So, so you put a quiz out there and they love to dive into that. But the other one is the deflection equation. Because shear and moment is pretty easy to get the units right. But as you know, that's dang deflection equation, because of the inches, you kind of got to convert the inches on the numerator. Otherwise you're going to have a problem, right? And so, but that one I get wrong a lot. And so I know the answers by heart. I'm like, oh, you missed it. go try again. I mean,
it's sagging whatever 287 inches or something. You're like, oh, multiply by 12 for the moment.
yeah, you're off by 12. You probably need to check that one again, because I mean, to be fair, it could have been a question that had a detracting answer, but that's not the case. It's just you came up with a crazy number. So, but I mean, this is the age of, not to mention we have, all these softwares, Intercalc and Risa, and obviously MathCAD and such. Not to mention your HP 48G, which works perfectly fine. But we also have AI. Now, I haven't had a lot of success with calculations on AI, but we have all this technology. Why are we missing deflection in a quiz that you're trying to get a job? And I said you can use whatever resource you want. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a big deal for me. I have a hard time. If you miss that question, I have a hard time even having a conversation with you, mm-hmm. frankly. Like, I'm not saying I won't, but you have to show out in other areas if you want to have a conversation and you miss that question. Yeah. So it's kind of a rule out question for me.
Interesting.
I mean, if you miss the frame, I can live with that, because that's a little more in depth and it's just challenging. And even if you miss, like, what's the wind speed on a hospital, I can live with that, kind of, because not everybody deals with such things, like right out of school. You haven't really dealt with ASCE 7, and you don't know where to look that up or whatnot. I mean, but a simply supported beam, that's statics one. That's like sophomore level engineering. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's a little bit about the quiz.
Yeah, I love sorry, I shouldn't say the vagueness anymore. The philosophical ones. Yeah. I just thought it's almost like, you say these things and then the internet takes it as, well, I'm going to tell you what you didn't say. Like, all of the reasons, all of the problems because you didn't say these things. And it's like, okay, I guess that's one way to look at it. But actually, where I want to pivot to is especially in position of person in your position where you're hiring, because I'm starting to, I've been managing some engineers for a couple of years now, but getting more involved in that role, and just seeing over time I guess, how do I want to put it? Letting that engineer go, and you kind of mentioned saying, well, just do your best. Like, don't ask me, not in a mean way, but like, I want you to take a period of time to take this problem that I'm giving you, or this task, and own it. Even if you don't get to a solution, I want you to get far enough and think about it hard enough and use all available resources. That's not just books. That's not just the internet. That's your colleagues next to you, and try as best you can to get as close as you can to what you think a solution would be. And if you don't think you're fully there, I want that list of questions that you have to say, well, I got stuck here because where do I find the modulus of elasticity? Where do I get, this, that, or the other thing? I don't know. But I know I got to here, and these are my roadblocks, and now can we discuss these specific questions? And it's just, I know that was kind of long-winded, but ultimately what I'm trying to ask is it a type of engineer, a type of person, or the way that we're being schooled, where it's like, I feel like that's becoming less to a degree, where you don't take it that extra step, or junior engineers don't take it that time to sit with themselves and stew on something. They get caught up in the complexity of the problem, maybe because they don't know it right off the bat, and then they freeze.
But yeah, that's a really good question, which is, how do you balance? So the one side of the question is, how do I balance mentorship versus, hey, I'm going to answer every single question, versus go do it yourself? And then as the engineer, how do you balance that same thing of, do I spin my wheels or do I ask the question? So, and it's tough on both sides, right? Because I've been there. I've been a fresh out of college guy, believe it or not. And I'm also somebody who has engineers working for me. And so it's a tough balance. I I like helping. I like answering questions. I mean, we're problem solvers. And so when somebody asks me a question, it's very hard for me to say, you just need to go and look at the code, or you need to go work through that a little bit more. I mean, I might say, go look at this, go look at that. Here's some example jobs. But here's one challenge. The biggest challenge of that is, we know we got to get that job out tomorrow,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And we know that we can't really wait on you to do it a week, because our budget's going to burn. So that's the other side, is being a business owner. I'm not just a lead engineer. I'm also the business owner, and we got to make payroll next week, and I got to get that job out so we can make payroll. I mean, it's a fact of the matter, right? I mean, we have to earn a profit as a business. So it does go into our decision-making process, frankly. And so sometimes you think, I'm just going to get this knocked out, right? I'm just going to do it. But you really have to let them do the work. And the more I've done it, the more it's become, I talk about the 3 R's this week, and, right, repeatable, reviewable. Having a system, having a process helps with that, right? Because you're like, hey, this is our system, this is how you do it. Because it's not, and the other thing is, it's not, the balance of this is, you can't just let people go off on their own if you don't have any kind of system, if you don't have any kind of training, if you don't have any baseline. And, college is not, that's the academic side. That's the academic training. The WL squared over 8, right? They give you the simply supported beam with the 220 and the 19 feet. In real world, you have to figure out about what is the 19 feet. Is it steel? Is it wood? And what's the W on the what's the W, right? You have to figure all that out. And is it even a simply supported beam? And then we start thinking about, well, you got the steel beam connected with all these, bolts. Is that really simply supported?
Mm-hmm.
And so, those are practical questions. And if you don't give them any training at all on that, then how can you expect them to do the work, right? So, and those are the questions that I think engineers should be asking about, is those practical type questions of, is this really simply supported? And you have to kind of explain to them, yeah, I mean, it's been proven that, that a shear tab is basically simply supported. It's a flexible enough to create a pin for practical purposes. And maybe now, could they read about that? Could they use ChatGPT to help them with that? Possibly, but I think it helps to have somebody that can help get you going right early on. And I don't know that I really had much of that when I started out. I mean, my boss man just told me, like, that's what I hired you for. Go figure it out. And there's the benefit of something like that is you realize, okay, I got to figure this out. And so I don't know if he did that intentionally or what, but it definitely made me grow exponentially, because I knew I had to figure it out, right? But on the other hand, I think I say exponentially because sometimes I wonder if I would have grown faster if I had somebody to say, hey, this is a simply supported beam. You don't have to like analyze each bolt for, moment or something. If I had somebody to help me through that, I mean, how many days would I have saved, on those early designs? And then I could have been working on more interesting things and more elaborate things, but instead I'm stuck on this first beam, So there's definitely a pro and con of it. I can see some engineers, some people just feel comfortable asking questions all the time. And usually what I tell people when they come in at first is, the old thing of there's no dumb questions. Like we have to be as open as possible. We you just have to ask whatever questions come to mind. So there's a time period, I feel like a window that should be open to any questions that are available. And then at some point you say, hey, we're past that window now. Like, you've been here a month. It's time to start doing this and figuring this out, So that's the balance of it, in my opinion.
Okay. No, that's great. I had a principal not too long ago. He was a great guy. Is actually on the younger side. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but he had a lot of expressions, and one of them was don't make a master's thesis out of it. It was like
Yeah.
if there was like this small job or whatever, and if you were new to that type of job, he's like, hey, I need you to bust this out. And when it was particular times when he was like, there's no fee, there's no time, and I grabbed you from another job to help with this one particular thing, just like, here's the info, like, don't overdo it. Like,
Yeah.
you got this, keep it simple kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing that I try to go over too, because we do have some processes that are just baked in and they work, right? Now, you may come in as a 10-year guy or 15-year guy and say, I don't agree with some of those processes. That's fine. But as a new engineer that comes here first year, and you may not even understand those processes, right? Like why we do what we do. But if you just take this number and put it here and then put that number and put it here, you're gonna get the answer we're looking for. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the engineers that do well here are the ones that just, they don't it sounds bad, but you don't have to understand every single number that you're doing, right? You don't have to understand every single calc. That's what the lead engineers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
You're there to crush through the calcs, right? And to follow that process. That's my opinion anyway. And then it'll come, right? Eventually, like the movie The Matrix, eventually it'll click and you'll be like, oh, I see what we're doing now.
Yes. Right? Yes.
But initially you're just like, you got bullets flying by and you can't see the Matrix yet.
I have realized I was fortunate to have some really great project managers, mentors, whatever you want to call the position, associates, looking back to exactly your point, doing wood shear wall calculations or something like that, or doing story tributary distribution to your vertical lateral elements for a flexible diaphragm, and just that whole process. And going through the very first time, I thought I was so in depth and it took me a long time and this, that, and the other thing. And then realizing the next job that was similar to that, I'm doing these calculations. I'm like, and then because now I'm familiar with, it's this part of the NDS or the SPID-WIS that I'm going to in tandem with the ASCE 7 Chapter 12 seismic, like, because I already have the comfort level to go to the particular places, now all of a sudden I'm reading everything and I'm like, wait a minute, it says to do this thing, it says to do that thing. Oh, I didn't do that last time. But some people might hear this and pause and go, oh, did something wrong last time. But that's not the case. You realize that the project manager gave you a parameter that already basically blanket statement and covered those little tiny things, and he knew that it was already maybe slightly conservative, but it covered all of the BS sort of kind of for a young engineer to stay on track to get a completed design that he knew worked. But now next time, you as the junior engineer, you're doing it again, you're like, oh, there's these extra things. Well, I'm going to do these extra things. And you do them, and then you're like, oh, it comes out to basically the same outcome that he had given me. I understand why he probably did that, or why she probably did that. And then I found that over and over again with really great project managers and mentors, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty. They really knew the process inside and out, that they could simplify certain things to help teach you and keep the process moving along and the business moving and the deadlines being hit. And now, because I had an extra bit of time for this other project and the repeatability, I'm able to have that click moment, like you're saying, myself, and see the background to it. And now I can go through the process, do it wholly, and make that connection myself of that trick almost for the next engineer coming up.
Right. Now you're providing the same type of parameters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In some instances, I really am. Yeah. I
think really just remembering what we're about as structurals is excellence. That's one of the things that we have to remember. And obviously failure is not an option. That's because that's what it boils down to. And, LinkedIn, YouTube, NDS, BidWiz, Steel, Simply Supported Beams, quizzes, all that stuff, all that's for one thing, which is excellence. So that's, and one of the things we say here is because the Enhanced podcast, it's to provide a greater good, right? Provide glory to God through excellence in structural engineering. There's a purpose behind it, right? So because that gives you some purpose in life, to wake up in the morning, I'm building some cool buildings so that we can make the world a little bit better. So that's, in other words, if you listen, one of the shows I talk about, are you stacking bricks or are you building a cathedral, right? And so in the same way, are you doing SpidWiz calcs, or are you doing excellence and being safe? So that's maybe the thing I want to bring in, is some context to everything we're doing as engineers and really even on this show today.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's something, I think that there are plenty of industries that also have major goals like that, but I know that we are in one where, we have that liability, we have that human life factor, which is the above all, and in order to protect that comes the requirement for excellence. And so it's just something that it can be really challenging, but is so rewarding at the end of the day, at the end of a deadline, when you see all of your hard work in the digital space and on paper and in communication and conversations with your team and with the design team transforming into something physical. I think that's a really powerful thing that we get to experience in our industry as well. You get to go from concept to knocking on a steel beam going, wow, and then they're finishing it out, and you see this community space or event space or public housing or whatever it is, and you're like, wow, it's something tangible in a community that and then is lasting. It's a symbol that your grandkids, your kids, your future generations, it'll most likely will still be hanging around, and you're like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, if it was done right.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, durability, corrosion. I talk about that a lot, rot and corrosion, because that's part of our job, is to make sure it doesn't rot, doesn't corrode. I mean, we live near salt water here, so it's very common to have corrosion and rot. And then also doing it in a collaborative way, meaning I saw a post yesterday from somebody else about RFIs. Are we being collaborative with our work? Are we making it easy and efficient? Not just from a cost of construction, but also the process of the construction itself and the headaches. So are we being prima donna engineers that are difficult to get along with? Or are we doing easy, enjoyable to get along with? So that's part of it too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andy, there's so much more that I want to talk about. We should get together again in the future, but I've had a great conversation here today with you, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Rich. It was a pleasure. Have me on anytime.
Awesome. We'll keep an eye out for more of your content coming out. I'll keep an eye out for the pop quizzes.
All right. Take care, buddy.
All right. Thank you.